Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gentlemen. Allincrypto here, and welcome back, guys, for another daily cryptocurrency market update. If you are finding yourself on this channel for the first time today, do consider becoming a subscriber because we drop an update just like this one every single day at 1 p.m. UK time to help you guys stay up to date with the latest and greatest things happening within the crypto space, but also the broader markets, and that is exactly what we are going to be doing in this video. I know we are all sick and tired of talking, even myself, about a Bitcoin spot ETF approval. However, it is exceptionally relevant, and it's very interesting that Bitcoin is running into a key level of resistance when a Bitcoin spot ETF essentially is likely or looking likely to be approved tomorrow. And we're going to start the video off with a clip from CNBC talking about this. Then we're going to be looking at some interesting things relating to this. One of which we've already previously covered in regards to the volume of money that will move Bitcoin by a certain amount. Then we're going to look at a report published by Standard Charter that are essentially estimating a certain amount of money to flow, or what they think is going to flow into Bitcoin once a spot ETF is approved. There's also something very interesting taking place with the individuals or the institutions that are offering a Bitcoin spot ETF, and they're all adjusting their fees. And it's kind of a battle to see who has the lowest fees because, of course, this is a unique selling point for them. Grayscale being a little bit stubborn at 1.5%. Some of them looking at 0.25%. So 0.25% you will pay in regards to fees. So this is rather interesting. The SEC also releasing things like no FOMO. Gary Gensler releasing tweets. We will look at all that. And then, of course, we'll go over to the price charts, looking at Bitcoin and see if we can forecast or take a look at what might happen. Like I say, very interesting that we're running into a key level that may see us pull back, a bit of a buy the rumor, sell the news sort of thing. It's going to be short-lived. Bitcoin, of course, saw a bit of an uptick yesterday. The reason, again, we're covering the Bitcoin spot ETF so much in these daily market updates is because it is just so relevant. And we are going to move to a world where you're going to have altcoin ETFs, which actually I think has real negative ramifications in regards to governance and direction of these protocols when you have the likes of BlackRock potentially being one of the largest participants in the governance system. So that's a very interesting future that we're moving towards. But as I said at the start of the video, let's dive into a clip from CNBC talking about the matter, and then we'll get into it.
Hey, David. Yeah, that is the question. A Bitcoin ETF, it's now widely expected to get the green light this week. Two sources close to the process now telling me it's looking like Wednesday, which is also the deadline for Cathie Wood's ARK and 21 shares bid. Then I'm told potential trading would happen Thursday or Friday, but it has been a moving target here on dates. The SEC is expected to approve a handful of applications at once. Those sponsors filing even more paperwork this morning, where we are starting to get a sense of this price war emerging. There are 13 applications out there with different fees. Some are starting at zero and then rising once the fund hits a certain size. So BlackRock, for example, plans to start at 0.2% and then go to 0.3%. Fidelity at 0.39%. Grayscale looking like the highest here, 1.5%. This one's worth watching, guys. It's looking to convert an already publicly traded Bitcoin trust, GBTC, into an ETF, so known as an uplist. With 27 billion roughly under management, GBTC would become one of the largest commodity-based ETFs if it is approved. The fund used to trade at a steep premium to Bitcoin, but then you've seen it switch, and it's been trading at a pretty steep discount in the past year or so, as much as 45% last year. That has narrowed to about 5%. So if that fund converts into an ETF, the discount essentially disappears overnight, starts trading at the price of Bitcoin. Some are taking that as an arbitrage trade, an opportunity there. Crypto prices have shot up in anticipation of this approval. Some are cautious, though, including Cathie Wood, who's among those taking profits, at least when it comes to Coinbase, ahead of any news here this week.
So I think it's pretty likely at this point that an ETF does get approved tomorrow. I think if the SEC was to deny the approval of an ETF at this point, we've looked at this previously, they're going to end up in a lot of lawsuits with these institutions. They've already lost lawsuits to the likes of Grayscale. So very interesting, a lot of confirming things happening right now. Also, we looked at the fact that the SEC had released this, or published on Twitter, this no-go to FOMO tweet. It's kind of a bit of an inkling. Also, you had Gary Gensler release a tweet yesterday. There is a bit of a fee war going on. And Caitlin Long is warning that this actually isn't necessarily a positive thing. She says, when fees are lower than costs, please, please, please ask yourself how the asset manager is making money managing the fund. With no fee funds, the answer is usually securities lending, a practice that can pose a lot of hidden risk to investors. What's really going on here? So, very interesting, also kind of contradictory that the SEC has basically been saying they don't want to approve an ETF because it's going to be manipulated. Of course, they took Binance out or did a kind of hostile US takeover of Binance, I should say, only to give it to the hands of institutions that will ultimately manipulate the price to an amplified degree using derivatives and the various tools that they have. So this is interesting, kind of an also confirming factor in regards to the ETF approval. It's essentially a race to the bottom with fees, and then they'll up them with the interest. We saw yesterday, and we looked at this yesterday, the sort of estimates on how much volume in regards to inflows would actually move the price. And they reckon $93 million into Bitcoin would move the price by 1%. So they reckon that every $1 billion into ETF inflows will be or result in around about a 10% gain for Bitcoin. And this was a report published by Standard Charter that essentially is looking at, they're essentially calling in the year of 2024 for around about 50, which would be a 500% gain to $100 billion. $10 billion would be 100%. And of course, $50 billion would be 500%. $100 billion would be 1,000%. So that's a 10x based on if it was all just buying. Of course, it doesn't work like that. You're going to have sell pressure. You're going to have a lot of other participation in the markets. It's not just going to be straight up inflows. But this gives you a kind of degree based on what Standard Charter are predicting, or gives you a kind of barometer based on what Standard Charter are predicting that, there's going to be quite a large inflow and ultimately this is likely to move the price. Let's now go over to the charts. I think, and we addressed this yesterday, there's a lot of anxiety in regards to an ETF actually being approved. And I don't think there needs to be. Yes, okay, there might be a bit of a sell the rumor, buy the news, or buy the rumor, sell the news kind of event taking place. However, I think this will be short-lived. And actually, it's very interesting to us that Bitcoin is running into a key level here at around about 48,000. I think Bitcoin yesterday touched 47,300. I would like to see on the approval of an ETF a bit of a spike into a correction that essentially then, just like we predicted down here that Bitcoin was going to get to 42,000 in the year of 2023, then we can look at predictions moving forwards, and we can essentially, in the same way that we drew this inverse head and shoulders down here, draw on higher up and predict what is likely going to be a target to round about the 100 and potentially 50 plus K mark. That is ultimately where I see Bitcoin going. I think you have cross-market confirmation that there's a lot of bullish sentiment around all the markets for this year. And I think that plays out. And I think that Bitcoin getting to the sort of 48,000 mark, having a bit of a pullback, which is kind of how I see things playing out, only then to set up for more continuation and a broader pattern that we can kind of track moving forward. So do become a subscriber and make sure you are up to date with what we're sort of forecasting for Bitcoin. We got 2023 very right, 2022 very right. And of course, we all know how 2020 and 2021 went. It was a spectacular year for us. So we're expecting good things ultimately to come out of this, and the sort of action that's set in motion with a spot Bitcoin ETF to take place. If you look at a gold chart when it had an ETF, back in 2004, if you look at the S&P chart when that became a sort of ETF, they both did and exponentially grew after an ETF was approved. And ultimately, you unlock a hell of a lot of capital when you can sort of have an institution like BlackRock offering products as the largest asset manager in the world. This is ultimately what we potentially could be looking at moving forward if this setup. So I'm actually welcoming of a pullback. This is going to give you a Bitcoin target of around about 150,000. This is something that I'd absolutely love to see. And ultimately, we're not really looking at too many altcoins just yet until Bitcoin sorts itself out. It's always good. There's always a silver lining with negative price action. And I think that we all got very giddy over Christmas. It's nice to see a bit of a pullback. Altcoins get, hit exceptionally hard. And people often forget just how volatile crypto is. So it's kind of brought us back down to earth how the year's started. My personal take on how I see ultimately the ETF playing out is you are going to likely get the sell the news event, but it's going to be short-lived. It's going to be a great opportunity that's ultimately going to set up for further continuation. You know, we did look at this sort of store box that Bitcoin seems to have pierced through. If we drop down the time frames and we go back to the charts, you had a bit of a continuation pattern setting up here that looked a little bit unlikely on this slam down, but it's then gone on to put in and move on to higher ground. There's a lot of hype around the Bitcoin spot ETF. I think it is largely priced in, but I also think, you know, just like with everything, usually it gets fully priced in once the event happens, and then there's a bit of a cool down before you play out what has now been set in motion. So that is really all we've got for you guys. Our altcoins are looking healthy. We're now exploring, you know, really small cap altcoins that genuinely have great fundamentals behind them. If you want to get on board with those, please do consider becoming a Patreon, and do make sure you guys go over and check out allincrypto.com. On that note, I am going to love and leave you. If you've enjoyed this content, a like is always greatly appreciated. So is a comment, and I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.